Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another marvelous video. Today we're going to take a look at one of the most iconic pieces of science fiction tech, the Stargate. It was first introduced to the world back in 1994 in Roland Emmerich's film Stargate, and this massive ring-shaped device instantly became a sci-fi legend. The movie went on to become an entire franchise, with Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, Universe, and Origins. But what exactly is a Stargate? How does it work? Well, in this video, we're going to explore just that. So whether you're a longtime fan or totally new to this, get ready as we dive into the anatomy of the Stargate. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What is the Stargate? Alright, so what exactly is a Stargate? At its core, a Stargate is this massive ring-shaped device made from a nearly indestructible material called nakata that creates a stable wormhole between itself and another gate somewhere out there in the galaxy. When you dial an address, the Stargate locks in on another gate's unique coordinates, forming a connection that lets you travel across thousands of light years in just a few seconds. It's basically the ultimate shortcut across space. But the Stargate is not just a cool piece of tech, it's the backbone of the entire Stargate universe. Once the connection is established, people can travel between worlds almost instantly. From the moment the gate in Egypt was activated in the 1994 Stargate film, it started a chain of events that would lead to many missions, alliances, wars, and discoveries across the universe. It is also known as the Chapa-I in the ancient tongue of the Goa'uld, and as Astria Porta in the language of the ancients. Who built the Stargates and why? So, who were the masterminds behind the Stargates? They were constructed by the ancients, known as the Alterans. Do not mistake them for your average advanced aliens. They were one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations to ever exist in the Stargate universe. They first came up in Stargate SG-1 in the Season 2 episode called The Fifth Race, and from that point on, they became one of the most important pieces of the entire franchise's mythology. They were part of a legendary group called the Alliance of Four Great Races, and were basically seen as the ancestors of humanity. After making their way into the Milky Way, they actually settled on Earth, which became one of their central homeworlds. But they didn't just hang around here. They seeded life across multiple galaxies, helping it evolve on planets that would have otherwise stayed empty. They built the Stargates as a way to travel and connect with distant worlds, not just to explore them, but to share knowledge, spread civilization, and in their own way, leave behind a legacy. They didn't just stop at a few gates here and there. They created gates on thousands of planets across galaxies. But here's the thing. The ancients did not stick around to explain how it all worked. Over time, they ascended, which in Stargate terms means they left their bodies behind and now exist just as pure energy on a higher plane of existence. What they left behind was a vast ancient network of Stargates scattered across the stars, waiting to be rediscovered. And that's exactly what happens when Earth stumbles across one buried in the sands of Egypt. How does a Stargate work? Each Stargate has 9 chevrons around its outer edge, and when two gates align, they create a stable wormhole that lets you pass from one point in space to another in an instant. But here's the catch again. This travel is one way. Once you go through a gate, you cannot just flip the switch and come back the same way. When a Stargate activates, it sends out a burst of energy, often called the kawoosh, which helps form the wormhole. Now, this burst of energy can be quite destructive. So to keep it under control, something like an iris is used to block the event horizon and prevent any chaos from happening because of the unstable vortex. As soon as the wormhole is up and running, the magic happens. You can step right through the event horizon, which looks like a puddle of liquid. But it ain't simple. Your body gets broken down on a subatomic level, passed through the wormhole as energy, and then reassembled at the other end, giving you back your original form. But if you try to reverse that process, it doesn't does not end well. Matter just cannot travel back through the gate. It turns into energy and gets lost. The Stargates themselves are built out of Nakada, a super tough material that can handle some serious damage, like surviving meteor impacts or crashing through the atmosphere. But there's a catch. If you push the Stargate beyond its limits, you're looking at a massive explosion, so big that it could even destroy all life on that planet. So the tech is powerful, but it has its risks.
What the hell do you think you're doing? Open that iris and dial the alpha.
What is the iris and how does it work? Alright, so next, let's talk about one of Earth's most critical defense tools when it comes to the Stargate, the iris. The iris is this metal shield installed over the Earth Stargate, and its job is pretty straightforward. Stop anything or anyone from coming through the gate unless they're invited. It works by sitting just microns away from the wormhole's event horizon, so when something tries to come through without permission, it gets destroyed before it can even reassemble. The iris looks like a set of overlapping metal blades, about 20 of them, that open and close just like a camera shutter. Now, even though the iris on Earth's Stargate is pretty much our first and last line of defense, it's not completely impenetrable. A few things can get through, like radio waves, for instance, and high-speed particle beams that are moving at light speed. Basically, if it's not solid matter, there is a chance it can slip past. But there is one known technology that managed to cheat the system flat out, and that is Tolan tech. In one instance, when the Stargate connected to a black hole, the gravitational pull was so intense that it actually ripped the original iris right out through the gate. After that little disaster, Stargate Command upgraded it. The new one was built from a trinium-titanium alloy, tough enough to handle ridiculous temperatures and whatever else might come its way. Here's how it works in practice. Whenever a wormhole starts dialing into the SGC, the iris snaps shut instantly. It stays that way unless a valid deactivation signal comes through. SG teams carry these little transmitters called GDOs. They send a special IDC, or iris deactivation code. It's all managed from two places: the palm scanner in the control room or a manual override switch on the wall in the embarkation room. And the palm scanner was not just added for convenience, it became a permanent fixture after an invisible alien known as a Ritu managed to sneak in and tamper with the system. The iris has saved countless lives, sure, but there have been a few cases where it got bypassed. Certain weapons can get through it, though not very effectively, and certain energy too. In one extreme case, General Bauer detonated a Nakata-enhanced nuke while still connected to Earth's gate. The explosion sent radiation right through the wormhole. The iris blocked some of it, but it was not built for that kind of heat. If the gate had not auto-shut after 38 minutes, everything would have been destroyed. What is an address? So here's how dialing a Stargate actually works. To travel to another planet, you need an address. Basically, a specific combo of glyphs you punch in to lock onto your destination. Most of the time, you're using 7 symbols. The first 6 are like plotting points in 3D space. They zero in on where you want to go. The 7th glyph is your starting point, the gate you're dialing from. Now, if you're trying to go really far, like to another galaxy, you'll need an 8th glyph. All this does not mean that you can randomly start punching in symbols to discover new worlds. It doesn't work like that. The addresses are not random. You could stand there for days entering thousands of combos and never land a lock. That's because the number of possible addresses is huge. The tricky part is that stars are always moving, which means addresses need constant updating. So over time, a lot of Stargate addresses just stop working, and this is where the DHD comes in to fix it. What is a DHD? Now let's talk about what exactly the dial home device, or DHD, is. The ancients called it the clavis, but for everyone else, it's the pedestal-shaped console you will usually find standing in front of a Stargate. This thing is the key to making the gate work. The DHD wirelessly connects to the nearby Stargate and basically handles all the heavy lifting. You do not need to manually spin the gate or hook up some computer system. Just press the symbols like a giant keypad and hit the big red button in the the center. It's kind of like an oversized touchpad. Now, these things are packed with control crystals that store a ton of information. And while using a DHD seems simple, it's doing some seriously advanced math every time you dial. It calculates things like stellar drift in just seconds, stuff that takes Stargate Command's best computers weeks to figure out. It even powers the gate, which makes it a self-contained unit ready for interplanetary travel. But here is the catch. You still need to know where you are dialing. The DHD will not magically give you destinations. If you don't already have a valid gate address, you could be punching in symbols for months without ever making a connection. The only known exception is the DHD on Destiny. That one actually lets users select gate addresses directly. Originally, every Stargate came with its own DHD, always placed right in front of the gate. But over time, a bunch of them have been lost, damaged, or just vanished, and that creates some big problems. See, you can dial into a Stargate that does not have a DHD, no problem, but dialing out again is a whole other story. Without a working DHD, SG teams had to get creative by using lightning rods or other improvised power sources and manually spinning the gate ring on models that still allow it.
Unlike any found nodes.
Chevron 5.
What are the chevrons on the Stargate? Now let's talk about those fascinating V-shaped mechanisms you see around a Stargate, the chevrons. These are not just there for the aesthetics. They're actually sophisticated locking mechanisms spread equally around the gate's entire circumference. Their job is to lock in stellar coordinates and pinpoint exact locations across the vastness of space. Here's how it works. Inside the ring of the Stargate, there's an inner track that spins around and lines up different symbols. When a symbol lines up correctly, one of the chevrons slams down, locks it in place, then pops back up, and the gate remembers it. You keep doing that until all the required chevrons have locked in. Normally, you need 7 chevrons to complete a typical address. The first 6 chevrons pinpoint a spot in space by mapping out a 3D location, and the 7th chevron, well, that one marks your point of origin, where you're dialing from. When those 7 are locked in, the gate can create a stable wormhole, and you're good to go. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes you need an 8th chevron. That one is a bit more advanced. It basically adds an extra layer. This is what lets you connect to a Stargate in another galaxy, like jumping from Earth to Atlantis. But dialing that far takes a ton of power, way more than a standard 7-symbol connection. And then there is the 9th chevron, the rarest of them all. About 3 years into the Atlantis expedition, researchers discovered a mysterious 9-chevron address buried in the city's database. That kicked off a massive effort back on Earth to figure out what it meant and how to use it. Eventually, they cracked it. The 9th chevron was the key to reaching the Destiny, a ship that was built by the ancients hundreds of thousands of years ago. It was made to travel across galaxies on autopilot, always on the move. So the 9th chevron does not just dial a location, it dials that ship wherever it happens to be in the universe at that exact moment. Pretty cool, right? What's really fascinating is how the ancients seemed to weave chevrons into more than just the Stargates. They even built them into the very design of the Destiny itself. The entire ship is actually shaped like a chevron, and when you step inside, you'll see that same symbol all over the place. A lot of the rooms have chevrons painted or carved right into the floor, usually pointing toward whatever the focal point of the room is. Now, what does that mean? Well, it could suggest that the chevron was not just a design. Maybe it was something more. Maybe it was a symbol of their civilization, or something that held deeper meaning in their culture. Another possibility is that since Destiny's mission was to trail behind the seed ships, the ones that went out ahead, placing Stargates across the universe, maybe the chevron became a kind of symbol for that purpose. Why do some Stargates have more symbols than others? Some Stargates have more symbols than others because their design reflects the complexity and range of destinations they can dial within the Stargate network. In the Milky Way, for example, Stargates usually have 38 symbols on them. Each one represents a different star constellation, and the system uses 7 chevrons to dial an address. Now, not all gates follow that exact blueprint. Take the ones in the Pegasus galaxy. Those have 35 symbols. Still 7 chevrons, still functional, but the symbols match up with constellations from that galaxy instead. And then there is the Destiny class gate. This one has 36 symbols and is built to use up to 9 chevrons, and it's like that to make intergalactic travel possible. So the more symbols and chevrons a gate has, the farther it can reach. Can anything pass through a Stargate? So, can just anything make it through a Stargate? Not exactly. The gate does not work like a regular door, where you can just walk through. When you step into an active wormhole, the Stargate actually breaks you down at a subatomic level, like we already discussed, and then sends you across space to be reassembled on the other side. Matter can only travel one way through an established wormhole, from the dialing gate to the receiving gate. Anything trying to go backward will be destroyed. However, radio signals and other types of electromagnetic radiation can travel in both directions, which makes it possible for teams to maintain communication with their home base. There are size constraints as well. The wormhole aperture is only so big, so anything larger than the Stargate itself simply will not fit. This is why you never see massive ships going through. They would need to be small enough to pass through the ring. If a gate is buried or blocked on the receiving end, nothing will rematerialize. The wormhole will establish, but will not let matter transfer through, preventing travelers from materializing inside solid rock. Some specialized Stargates, like those in the Pegasus galaxy, have additional security features that prevent certain threats from passing through. Another thing that might be a concern is that once the wormhole begins to disengage, if something tries to go through during the shutdown process, it may not make it. What happens if you dial an incorrect address? Okay guys, this is not actually discussed in the franchise, but what exactly do you think would happen if you dialed the wrong address? Well, let me share my thoughts with you. We actually get a clear example of how this works with the Unas slaver. He has the address to the Goa'uld homeworld and dials it in to take the Unas there. But even he points out they could stand there pushing buttons all day and nothing would happen. That's because unless the address is correct, the Stargate just does not respond. And visually, we get a little confirmation too. If the address is wrong, or if it's incomplete or corrupted, the DHD's lights fade out, and you hear that telltale power down hum, like it's discharging the energy it tried to pull in to start the connection. From this, we can safely guess that when you misdial, the DHD basically cancels the attempt and dumps the power it just tried to use. The odds of randomly hitting a valid address are so low that most combinations do absolutely nothing. We're not talking about billions of Stargates out there. It is a finite system. This idea actually comes up early in SG-1, before they had the cartouche or the ancient database to help them find real addresses. It also helps explain why losing track of a planet, like the System Lords losing Earth, creates such a weird paradox. Without a DHD dialing history or a known address, it's almost impossible to just stumble across a working one. And technically, that failure point comes at the 7th chevron. If it does not lock, the gate is not going anywhere. What do you guys think about this? Are there any other answers to this question? How fast is travel through a Stargate? Traveling through a Stargate looks like you're being launched through a tunnel in space. On average, it only takes about 3.2 seconds to go from one gate to another, but depending on when, the ride can feel very different. Back in the early days, in the original movie and the first few episodes of SG-1, walking through a gate was not exactly a smooth experience. People would come flying out of the other side like they had been shot from a cannon, covered in frost, often hitting the ground hard. One of the characters even said that it was like going through a blizzard naked. But as the show went on, that rough ride smoothed out. Instead of being flung out, people would just step through it like it was any other door. The difference was that the team at Stargate Command had fine-tuned their dialing computer, making the whole experience way easier on the body. Do Stargates require maintenance? Generally, Stargates are built to last. They're incredibly durable and need very little hands-on upkeep. In fact, many of them have been fully operational for millions of years without any obvious maintenance at all. That said, Stargates can be damaged or rendered inoperable under specific conditions. First-generation gates, in particular, are more vulnerable. So while they do not need regular maintenance, when they do break or are tampered with, they're not indestructible. But in terms of long-term stability, Stargates are about as low maintenance as you can get. Now, dial-home devices, or DHDs, are more fragile. They handle power, address corrections, and calculations. So if one gets damaged or lost, Stargate teams have to get creative, using external power sources, manual dialing, or even computers like the one at Stargate Command to operate the gate. What happens if two objects try to occupy the same space during transit? Alright, so what actually happens if two things try to go through a Stargate and end up in the same spot? Let me share my thoughts with you about that. We know that Stargates don't just send things in just like that. They break them, convert them into energy, and reassemble them after they go through. Because of this breakdown and rebuild process, the idea of two objects literally crashing into each other mid-transit does not really apply here. Now, if two things did somehow try to come out at the exact same spot on the other end, the Stargate's systems would likely catch that. It could either pause one of the transits or cause a failure in reassembly. What do you guys think about this? Are there any other answers to this one? Are there limitations to Stargate travel? Stargate travel has its fair share of limitations. For starters, the Stargate needs a specific amount of power to establish a wormhole. Dialing within the same galaxy is a 7-chevron address, which is relatively manageable. But if you're trying to connect to another galaxy, you will need an 8-chevron address and a lot more power. And if you're aiming for a 9-chevron destination, like dialing the Destiny, you're talking about an energy requirement that is way beyond what a normal DHD can handle. And speaking of DHDs, not every Stargate has one. That's where it gets tricky. Without a DHD, dialing becomes harder, the range drops, and the gate needs a serious power source to even establish a connection. That's why places like Stargate Command had to build their own supercomputers and energy systems to get the job done. Then there's also the fact that matter can only travel through the gate one way. That's why SG teams rely on GDOs to transmit their ID codes before the base opens the iris. What are the main differences between the Milky Way, Pegasus, and Destiny-class Stargates? Starting with the Milky Way Stargates, these are actually the second version the Ancients designed in the Milky Way, where they built a massive network of these. You can recognize them by their dark gray color and those red-orange chevrons. The top chevron even has a triangular piece that slides in and out when it's locking in a symbol. The glyphs sit on an inner ring that spins while dialing, and you can even move the ring by hand, though it's not easy. That comes in handy if there's no DHD around. Later on, they made their way over to the Pegasus galaxy, and these Stargates are the latest model the Ancients came up with. They are silver, with a sleek blue inner ring and bigger blue chevrons. No spinning parts here. Each glyph just lights up in a ring and stays lit once it's locked in. They're also not sitting on any fancy platforms like the Milky Way ones. Most of them are just set directly into the ground. Pegasus gates cannot be manually dialed. No moving ring means no fallback option if you do not have the right tech. And there's another feature too. Pegasus gates were built to not dial out of their galaxy. These gates cannot even attempt an intergalactic connection unless a special control crystal is in play, and that one is normally stored in Atlantis. If you place a Pegasus gate near a Milky Way gate, the newer Pegasus gate takes priority every time. Pegasus is also home to something called space gates. Instead of being set on the ground, these Stargates are literally floating in orbit above a planet. Then we have the oldest of the bunch, the Destiny-class Stargates. These go way back. They are believed to be the earliest model ever built, and they were not placed manually. Instead, automated seed ships went ahead of the Destiny, dropping these gates into position across a spread of different galaxies. Unlike the newer designs, Destiny gates are pretty bare. The whole thing spins freely, no inner track, no fancy moving chevrons. Because of that, their range is limited. They can only connect to a handful of nearby gates, not an entire galaxy's worth like the newer ones can. How does the Stargate network update itself to account for stellar drift? The Stargate address system is kind of like dialing a cosmic phone number. It uses the positions of star constellations. When it was first set up, everything was based on how those constellations appeared from Earth. But here's the twist. Stars move. Over time, as they slowly drift through the galaxy, those original coordinates start to shift. That means the addresses to other planets can become outdated. And unless you adjust for that drift, you might be dialing into empty space. Luckily, the gates themselves are pretty smart. Most of them can talk to each other now and then, updating their coordinates automatically to keep everything synced up. It's like they're comparing notes on where everyone is moved to. But Earth's gate does not have a DHD, the dialing device that normally handles all of this, and it was out of the loop for a long time. So Stargate Command had to get creative. They built a powerful dialing computer that takes stellar drift into account and recalculates addresses from scratch. catch. It's no small task, especially when dealing with thousands of years of cosmic motion. Now, while most Stargates stay put on their home planets, they can be moved. And when that happens, their address updates to match their new location in space. But every once in a while, you'll come across a gate that's locked to a specific address no matter where it ends up. Can two Stargates exist on the same planet? It might sound impossible, but two Stargates can actually exist on the same planet, or even within the same star system, and still function just fine for dialing out. But here's the catch. Only one of them can receive incoming connections at a time. When that happens, the Stargates follow a sort of built-in order to figure out which one gets priority. Now, if only one of those gates is hooked up to a DHD, it automatically becomes the default. But if both have dialing devices connected, then the Ancients' original programming takes over and decides which gate wins. Things get even more interesting when you mix different gate models, like having a Milky Way Stargate near one from the Pegasus galaxy. In those cases, the Pegasus gate usually takes control and gets all the incoming wormholes. But technicians have figured out how to override that default behavior with some careful programming. This made the intergalactic gate bridge possible. At the heart of it was the Midway space station, which had one gate from each network. This allowed for smooth two-way travel between galaxies, something that would have been impossible without getting around that gate priority issue. Can Stargates be destroyed? Now, if there's one thing the Stargates are known for, aside from, bending space and sending people across galaxies, it's how insanely tough they are. Some of these gates have been around for millions of years and still work like they were installed last week. The one found in Antarctica, often called the Beta Gate, is estimated to be about 50 million years old. And the one aboard the ancient ship Destiny is even older, by another 10 million years. Yet both still function perfectly. These things are extremely durable. Now, not all Stargates are built the same. Second and third generation models are practically indestructible, but those first generation gates, the early builds, are a little more vulnerable. They're tough for sure, but hit them with certain spacecraft weapons and you might just knock them out. These gates have survived things you would not believe. The intense gravitational pull of black holes, direct meteor strikes, and even the extreme heat of stars. When Stargate Command once used a knock-it-off bomb that completely obliterated an entire planet, the Stargate still remained intact. That's not to say they can't be destroyed, though. The US military developed this special knock-it-off-enhanced nuke called the Mark IX specifically to try to destroy a Stargate. Their first attempt did not work because an Ori shield around the gate just absorbed all that energy. They eventually succeeded against a Pegasus gate by cleverly positioning the bomb behind it, which prevented the wormhole from absorbing the explosion. In one crazy instance, they used a portable force field to protect a Stargate as it traveled through a star. Everyone thought it would eventually melt down, but it didn't. The oldest first-generation gates are definitely the most vulnerable. During the Novus colony evacuation, a single Berserker drone fired a relatively weak energy weapon that punched a hole right through a Stargate's ring, completely disabling it. That was the first time we saw a weapon damage a gate like that. It might be a specific weakness against Berserker technology. That said, these ancient wonders are still remarkably resilient. Another first-generation gate survived both a massive rock slide and a C4 explosion used to dig it out, so you would still need something pretty powerful to actually damage one of these incredible devices. Another weakness comes from something called the Atero device, which causes energy to build up in the event horizon until the gate basically overloads and explodes within minutes, an explosion so massive you can see it from space. This is what destroyed both the Atlantis Stargate and another one at a traveler settlement. There is a way to make one of these go offline, though. When it's buried very deep in the Earth's crust and the ring's center is filled so that there's no space for a wormhole to form, it can be rendered offline. Marvelous verdict. Well, with that, guys, we've come to the end of yet another video. It's wild to think just how far the Ancients pushed their technology across galaxies, right? Which of the Stargate designs did you find the most fascinating? If you could pick any destination to go now with one of these, where would you go? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed watching this, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. Until next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.